Hey guys, it's Julie with Julie's Designs. I take thrifted items and upcycle them for resale. In this video, we are going to be using cabinet doors and creating some great wall art. I feel like cabinet doors are at abundance at many thrift stores and resale stores, and they're already put together for you, so you don't have to take out any tools, and you can just upcycle them into a great piece of wall art. And to help us upcycle these doors, we're going to be using the IOD font stamps. So I'm going to show y'all which ones specifically I'm going to be using. We're going to be using the Retro Stamp, and we're going to be using this one in different ways than you might think. I want to give y'all different options that y'all maybe have not even thought of yet. This is my personal favorite, the Typsetting Stamp. It is very vintage looking, and you have the uppercase letters, the lowercase letters, and the numbers. I really like this one. Y'all leave a comment below and let me know what is your favorite font stamp from IOD. And then we're going to be using the Swoosh Stamp, which is a more scripty font. And then, y'all know IOD just released some new products, and one of them was this Alphabellies Stamp. And I am loving this stamp so much. It's specifically made to use as an accessory to the font stamps, but I feel like it's a great bang for your buck because it can be used with all the font stamps and it can be used on its own. And I am just obsessed with vintage looking items, and I feel like this just is vintage, it's farmhouse, it's just everything that I love. I am so excited to be using this stamp. And if you want to find your own stamps, in the description below, there will be a link to find a retailer near you, along with all the products that I use today will be in the description below. So we're going to get started on the video, but I want y'all to leave me a comment below and let me know what was your favorite cabinet door that I upcycled today. And also I want to know what is your favorite IOD stamp and what do y'all feel about these Alphabellies, because I'm obsessed. Love them. All right, let's get started.
The first thing I'm going to do is remove any hardware that is on the cabinets. I'm just using my cordless drill to do this. And then all the places that had holes from the hardware, I'm going to take the IOD Air Dry Clay and fill these in. I find that this works perfectly for this. It doesn't shrink like caulk. And once it dries, I let it dry for 24 hours and then I just sanded it flat so it blended in perfectly with the cabinetry, and it's also paintable so you won't have any problems with your paint sticking to the clay. For the first project, I'm going to be using the IOD Retro Stamp. I'm also going to be using IOD Air Dry Clay. I'm going to roll it out on my mat. I'm using one of the bigger mats that IOD sells. You want to roll it out, but not too thin because you don't want your letter to be too fragile. So I took the brayer and I just used that to help me push the stamp down into the clay. And now I'm just removing the excess clay. Now I'm going to be more precise with my X-Acto knife and just go with my X-Acto knife around the edges and removed all of the excess clay. I left all my letters on this larger mat to dry overnight because I didn't want to pull them off and have the letters breaking, and just leaving it dry overnight on this mat worked out perfectly. And you don't have to worry too much about the edges being perfect because once they've dried for 24 hours, you can go back and sand it. So I do have a few cracks in the letter, but that's okay. That is going to add to the character of this piece. I definitely am going for that handmade look. I just want to sand the edges and clean them up a little bit, but leave the character. Copper is very popular right now, so I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum metallic finish spray paint in a copper finish and just give these clay letters one coat of this beautiful copper spray paint. I'm using the long skinny cabinet for this project, and I'm realizing right now that I didn't actually really get it all the way on camera. So it's not the cabinet that I'm currently painting. It's the one next to it. And I'm using Rust-Oleum chalk paint in my paint sprayer, and I'm going to put one good coat on here just to give it a coat of fresh white paint, and I'm not going to distress it. I want this cabinet to have a nice clean look. Now that the copper paint on my letters have dried, I want to give it an aged effect. So I'm using a combination of like a bright blue paint and a little bit of darker green paint, and I'm just dabbing it on the edges where I think a natural patina would happen. Then I'm taking my paper towel and just dabbing on top of that just to kind of blend it in. I feel like when you're going for an aged look, the more layers, the better. I decided that I didn't really want any patina in the middle. I just kind of wanted it to be on the edges. So I'm just taking a baby wipe and just kind of dabbing the middle of the letters just to get rid of some of that patina. And then I'm going to take my Waverly Antiquing wax, and pretty much all you do is just brush it on and then you wipe it off, and it just creates this beautiful aged look along with the blue patina that you have already created. And once again, if you feel like it's too dark for you, you can take a baby wipe and just wipe some of that off. So it's 100% workable. You have time to get the perfect effect that you are going for. And then once these are dry, I'm going to take my Gorilla Glue clear grip adhesive and I'm going to attach these to my cabinet doors. Y'all, this piece came out so good. I cannot wait for y'all to see the final product. All my other cabinet doors, I'm leaving natural or I'm painting them white. So I decided for this smaller one to add a little bit of color. I'm using DIY paint in the color Apothecary, and I'm going to put 2 coats of paint on this cabinet door. Once the paint dried, I distressed the cabinet and I decided I wanted to put something in that piece in the center. So I grabbed some old book paper and put some Mod Podge down, and I am just pressing the paper into the edges. Now you want to make sure you let the Mod Podge dry thoroughly before you come back with an X-Acto knife and you cut out all the edges. If it's wet, your paper will tear. But if you wait till it dries all the way, you will not have any issues doing this. To bring the two finishes together and make it look more cohesive, I'm going to add white wax to the entire piece. You do white wax the same way we just did the antiquing wax. You simply brush it on with a brush and then you take a paper towel and you wipe it off. You want to let this dry thoroughly before you move on to the next step.
We're going to be adding the Alphabellies stamps and the Typsetting Stamp to this cabinet door. The Alphabellies stamps can be used on its own, but it's made to be used as an embellishment with the IOD stamps. So I'm going to pick out which ones I want to use and what letters I want to use and put my design together. Now, if you're having trouble trying to come up with a design and trying to figure out how to use the Alphabellies, they have some great examples on the packaging that comes with your Alphabellies stamp. This is design I chose. I'm just going to do a bee with a little bit of floral detail. Now I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. So the image you want on top, you stamp that first. So I want the bee on top, and then we're going to go back and stamp the background.
I'm going to take my smaller thin mount and I'm going to take the bee off. I think I called this a mat earlier in the video, the big one that I use, but they're technically called a thin mount, and they are so great to have in so many different sizes when stamping. Now I'm using my IOD ink pad. I have the color black on it, and I'm just going to put my stamp down. And the trick to stamping is to get it in where you want it to be and leave it there. And then you want to hold it firmly on one side while you push with the other, and then hold it firmly on the other side and then push with the other hand, and then pull it straight up. And there you go, perfect stamp. It's so exciting when you get a perfect stamp. And I like to clean my stamps right away with a baby wipe while they're still on the thin mount. It's just so much easier. Now I'm going to put my Alphabellies back on where I want them to go, and I'm going to take the thin mount and remove them. Now all the new IOD stamps come with a mask. It's just like a little clear piece the exact same size as your stamp. So when you're layering stuff, the piece that you already stamped, you want to put the mask over it, and your stamp will stamp on that mask instead of the stamp you already put down, so that way it'll look like it's in the foreground instead of the background. I wish I would have put the floral Alphabellies closer together so you could really see the effect, but I'm still learning how to use these, but I do think it came out very cute. I've painted and lightly distressed this cabinet, and now I want to create a drop cloth pocket to put on it. But first I want to stamp "Love Grows Here" on the drop cloth. I have these two rulers just so I know what my area is that's going to go on top of the cabinet. This one's going to be a little more complicated because we're going to be using the Alphabellies stamp. We're going to be using the lowercase typesetting stamp, and then we're also going to be using the swoosh stamp. What I'm going to do to make sure everything is in the right place is I'm going to keep the O, which is the center letter, and the two Alphabellies, which are going to be on the S and the G, all in their correct place. And I'm going to stamp those first. And then I'm going to put everything else from there where it needs to correctly be. I'm going to take my large thin mount and pick up my stamps so they're in the positions that they need to be. These are the first time I'm using the Alphabellies, and so when you're using a stamp for the first time, you want to take a very thin grit sandpaper and sand them lightly. When they come from the factory, they have a very slick finish, so giving them a little light sanding helps them to have a little more grit for the ink to hold on to. I'm going to add ink to my stamps and turn it over in the center of the drop cloth. Now that the center is done, I'm going to add back in my letters so I can see where I want them to be placed. I'm going to do the G and the S next, but first I'm going to take my little tiny Alphabelly mask and I'm going to mask them because I don't want the type to go over them. These Alphabelly masks are very small, so I highly suggest that as soon as you are done using them, you put them back in the bag. If not, they may be very hard to find. I know from experience. Okay, so I inked up the G and the S, and now I'm ready to put it down over my Alphabellies. Now, I did learn something else about the Alphabellies here. The G was perfect, but the S, I picked a spot where the script was a little bit too thick, so the Alphabelly just blended in. So if I could go back again, I probably would have picked a thicker Alphabelly for that spot, and the effect would have been a lot better. But this is my first time using these, so I'm kind of learning as I go, but I definitely love the effect. You can see how amazing it came out on the G, and there's so many to pick from. I just think I picked one that was just a little bit too small for that area of the S. And now I'm just going back in and I'm adding my letters one at a time. Now, the swoosh stamp also comes with mask. If you don't want that swoosh part to overlap, you can mask off each letter, but I just kind of go with it. I just try not to push too hard on the stamp that is going to be overlapping the other stamp, and I think it looks fine. Now we're going to add on the other words to our drop cloth. I am using the lowercase letters on the typesetting stamp. I love mixing fonts for a custom look. And I use fonts on this drop cloth pocket, but I also think a image stamp, like the farmhouse stamp, or maybe a butterfly would be so cute. Oh, what about some floral ones? The new floral ones that IOD came out with. That would be so cute. The last step is to attach the drop cloth to the cabinet door. I am just using my hand stapler for this and just simply stapling the drop cloth to the cabinet door. For this last project, we're going to be using this beautiful cypress door my neighbor gave me. We're going to turn it into a tray, but I don't like how the bottom molding is not the same size as the top molding. It's much thicker. So I'm just taking it on my table saw and cutting it down so that all the trim pieces are the same size.
When I am making trays, I like to try to make my own handles for them. That way they stand out from anything else that is on the market. I really try to avoid using handles that are purchased from the store. So I have these spindles. I cut down 2 of them, and then I just cut down some small blocks to be able to lift up the handles. I'm going to attach them together using my brad nailer. And then I'm going to paint my handles white, and then I will use screws from the bottom and attach my handles to here. So that's how I will put this whole piece together.
While the paint on the handles are drying, I'm going to go ahead and put a stamp on my tray. I want it to say gather. I've already laid it out. I'm using the retro stamp for this, and y'all, I know I spelled gather wrong at some point in the process. I figured it out and was able to fix it. It wasn't until I kind of walked away and looked at it and was like, okay, that is not quite right. Y'all know I can't spell. Y'all know this, okay? But I figured it out before I put it on YouTube. So are y'all proud of me? Oh my God, that does not even look close to right. But when you're up close, it's hard to tell. Okay, anyway, back to the project. So I'm using the retro stamp, and the thing I love about the retro stamp is you can use it as an outline. So I put the stamp down, and you want to keep it on your thin mount. Do not take your stamps off the thin mount because we're going to use them again. So I'm just taking some chalk paint that I took out my sprayer. So the paint on here is going to be the same color as my handle, so it'll all tie in together. And I'm going to put 2 coats of white paint on the letters. I want to go for a more worn look on this piece. So I'm taking a light grit sandpaper and just lightly sanding the white paint that I just put on there. It is completely dry before I start sanding it off. And that's the thing I love about this retro stamp is you can create a very worn, weathered, layered, old look. Let me show y'all this project that I did. This is a sign I made for somebody, and I love how I was able to layer different colors for something that looked very old and that had been there forever. I love that look. So this is something easy to create with the retro stamp. So I sanded it with sandpaper, then I'm coming back with a baby wipe, and that is giving it the exact look that I want. Now we're going to bring back the thin mount with our stamp on it, and this is why you don't take it off, because it's already in the exact position that we need. I'm going to load it up with the IOD Black Ink, and then I'm going to put it on top of the stamp for a nice clean finished look.